Okay, so, ready to unpack some serious drama.
Always up for a good deep dive, especially when it involves one of the biggest banks in the world.
Exactly. We've got JPMorgan Chase right in the spotlight. You shared some articles about this whole clash between employees and their CEO, Jamie Dimon, over, well, return to office policies.
Yeah, this isn't just some internal memo or anything. This is getting a lot of attention.
Right. It's like everyone's watching to see how this plays out, because it kind of gets at something bigger, right? Like, what does it even mean to be a good employee these days? Especially with like all this back and forth on remote work.
I think that's what makes this so fascinating. It really highlights these tensions so many companies are wrestling with. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what went down, though, maybe we should set the stage a bit.
Yeah, good point. Remind us about what things were like at JP Morgan Chase before this whole blow up.
Okay, so under Dimon, they actually had been pretty flexible, believe it or not. I mean, this is a major financial institution, right? But something like 40% of their workforce was working remotely, a couple of days a week.
Yeah, and then bam, Diamond makes this hard pivot, right? 5 days a week, back in the office for everyone. All 317,000 employees.
And that's where things get interesting. It all kind of came to a head at a town hall meeting.
Oh, man. Town hall meetings, you just know something's going to go down.
Right. So there's this employee, Nicolas Welch. He's a tech operations analyst, been with the company a few years.
Okay, so not some random new hire.
Nope, not at all. Anyway, he gets up during the town hall and straight up challenges Dimon.
Whoa, what did he say?
He basically argued that managers should have more say when it came to attendance. He even pointed to his own team's success. They were working across time zones, getting stuff done.
So his point was, if it's working, why fix it?
Pretty much. And it's interesting because it seems like his comments resonated with other employees. Like there was this whole petition going around.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. So it wasn't just him going rogue.
Exactly. And that probably didn't sit too well with Dimon. I mean, can you imagine having your CEO publicly called out like that?
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
So how did Dimon respond?
Let's just say he wasn't exactly thrilled. He pretty much shot down the petition and made it clear that he was sticking to the 5-day in-office policy.
So no room for negotiation.
Nope. From what I gathered, he said there had been, and I quote, extraordinary abuse of the flexible arrangements.
Wow. Sounds like he'd seen enough.
Yeah, and he also talked about how important in-person interaction is for building a strong company culture, especially for, younger employees.
Right, that whole idea that you miss out on mentorship and networking opportunities if you're not physically present.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the spontaneous stuff, right? Those random hallway conversations that can spark new ideas.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Dimon even called out Zoom-in name-only meetings, where people are just there in body but not really engaged. He really hammered home the point that face-to-face interaction is crucial.
Okay, so Dimon's made his position crystal clear. But what happened to Welch after he, kind of went head-to-head with the CEO?
Well, things took a pretty dramatic turn. Right after that town hall, he was told to clear his desk and leave.
He got fired for speaking his mind.
That's what everyone thought. It seemed like a pretty harsh reaction, even if his comments were, maybe a bit bold.
I mean, you don't see that every day, an employee publicly questioning the CEO and then getting fired.
Right. But hold on, because the story doesn't end there. It turns out it was like a knee-jerk reaction. A lower-level manager, maybe trying to be a little overzealous.
Oh, wow. So what happened?
Higher management stepped in, and Welch got his job back.
Seriously. Talk about a roller coaster. One minute you're out, the next you're back in.
It's pretty wild, right? But even though it was reversed, I think it still sends a message, doesn't it?
Yeah, don't mess with the CEO.
Exactly. But it also shows how much this whole issue matters to people. For some, remote work is more than just convenience. It's a core value. And to have that threatened, it can feel pretty intense.
It's about autonomy, control over your own time, and work-life balance, right? And all of a sudden, that's being taken away.
And the fact that this is happening at JPMorgan Chase, well, it makes it even bigger, right? This isn't just some small company. This is a global financial powerhouse.
It's a precedent. Everyone's watching to see what happens next.
Yeah.
So we've got this clash, right?
Yeah.
Dimon versus, well, at least some of his employees.
And it kind of gets at the heart of this whole debate. Individual freedom versus corporate control. Where do you draw the line?
And how do you balance the needs of a huge organization with the desires of individual workers? It's a tough one.
It really is. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? We haven't even gotten into Dimon's whole thing about bureaucracy and his plans to streamline JPMorgan Chase.
Yeah. So let's take a breath.
Yeah, we need to process all this.
We'll dive deeper into Dimon's rationale in part 2 of this deep dive. It's about more than just where people work. It's about how work gets done and who gets to decide. So it's pretty clear Jamie Dimon is all in on this whole return to office thing. But JPMorgan Chase did pretty well during the pandemic, right? I mean, record profits and all that. So what's the real story here? What's Dimon so worried about?
It's a good question, right? I mean, it's not like they were like struggling to survive or anything. I think to really understand Dimon's point of view, you got to look beyond just the numbers.
Okay, so it's more than just profits. What else is he thinking about?
Well, he's talked a lot about company culture, that whole idea that like you lose something when everyone's working remotely, those spontaneous interactions, the brainstorming sessions, the kind of energy you get when you're all in the same space.
Right, like the office vibe, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And he's worried that without people being together, JPMorgan Chase could lose its edge. Like they might become less creative, less innovative, less competitive in the long run.
And I remember reading about him making this comparison to like GE and Sears, like these huge companies that kind of fell apart.
Oh, yeah, he brought that up a few times. It's a pretty stark comparison, right? I mean, those were iconic companies. But his point was that they got bogged down in bureaucracy and complacency, and that's what ultimately led to their downfall.
So he's using them as a cautionary tale, basically.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, look, this could happen to us if we're not careful. And a big part of that for him is about being in the office, interacting face to face. He thinks that's essential for maintaining a dynamic and successful company culture.
It definitely makes you think.
Yeah.
But is it really just about like the vibe? Are there other reasons why he's so focused on in-person work?
Well, he's also talked about the impact on, younger employees, especially those who are like just starting their careers.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you do learn a lot from just being around more experienced people.
Right. Exactly. Like observing how they work, how they interact, how they solve problems. It's hard to replicate that remotely. And Dimon's worried that younger employees might miss out on valuable mentorship and networking opportunities if they're not in the office.
It's a valid point, for sure. I mean, Zoom's great and all, but it's not the same as actually being there.
Right. And, Dimon's even called out those like Zoom in name-only meetings, where people are just there in body, but they're not really engaged.
Oh, yeah. We've all been in those.
Yeah.
Checking email, multitasking, whatever.
Exactly. He sees that as a symptom of this like disconnect that can happen when people are working remotely. He's really big on that face-to-face interaction.
So, okay, we're getting a clearer picture of why Dimon's pushing so hard for this return to office. But it's not just about remote work, right? I mean, he's also gone after what he calls creeping bureaucracy at JPMorgan Chase.
Yeah, that was a whole other thing. It's like he's got this like two-pronged approach. On the one hand, he wants everyone back in the office. And on the other hand, he wants to cut down on all the like red tape and unnecessary processes.
So he's not just telling people where to work. He's also trying to change how they work.
Exactly. And he's not messing around either. He called for a 10% reduction in like everything, meetings, reports, approvals, you name it.
10%. That's a pretty big chunk.
It is. And it shows how serious he is about, streamlining things, making the company more efficient. He's trying to create a more agile and responsive work environment.
So it's all connected, right? This return to office mandate is part of a bigger plan to like reshape JPMorgan Chase.
I think so. It's like he's trying to create this new culture, one that's more dynamic, more efficient, and ultimately more competitive.
It's a bold vision, that's for sure. But is it realistic? I mean, can he really pull it off?
That's the big question, isn't it? And there are definitely risks involved. I mean, some people might see this whole thing as a step backward, right?
Especially those who, like, really value the flexibility of remote work. And it makes you wonder how all this is going over with the employees. Are they on board with Dimon's vision? Or are they pushing back?
Well, that's what we're going to explore in part 3 of this deep dive. We'll take a look at how employees are reacting to all of this and what it might mean for the future of work at JPMorgan Chase and maybe even beyond.
All right, so we've talked about why Jamie Dimon wants everyone back in the office and his ideas about cutting bureaucracy. But what about the people who actually work at JPMorgan Chase? How are they feeling about all this?
It's really a mixed bag. Some people are happy to be back. They miss that like social part of work, seeing their colleagues face to face and bouncing ideas around. And for them, going back to the office felt kind of like going back to normal.
Yeah, I get that humans are social creatures after all. And I think a lot of people like that sense of community you get from being in an office. Plus, there's some jobs where it just makes sense to be in person.
Totally. But there's also like a whole other group of people who are not so thrilled about this whole back to the office thing. They got used to working remotely and they feel like they're just as productive, if not more, when they're at home.
And they're like not having to commute and having more control over their schedules.
Right, exactly. They feel like they can have a better work-life balance when they're not tied to the office 5 days a week. And for some people, it's not just about preference, it's about necessity. They might have kids or elderly parents to care for, or other things going on that make it really hard to be in the office all the time.
And for those people, this policy change feels like a big step backward.
Right, it's like all the progress they made towards having more flexibility is suddenly gone. And that can be really frustrating. And for some, it might even be a deal breaker. Like they might start looking for other jobs that offer more flexibility.
So it sounds like Dimon's vision is running into some resistance.
Definitely. It's not as simple as just saying everyone back to the office and expecting everyone to be happy about it. He's dealing with a workforce that has very different needs and priorities. And it's going to be a challenge to find a solution that works for everyone.
It really highlights how complex this whole issue is. It's not just about JPMorgan Chase. It's something that companies all over the world are struggling with.
Yeah, what does the future of work look like? Is it everyone back in the office? Or is it a hybrid model? Or is it something else entirely? We're all trying to figure it out.
And I think the key is to really listen to employees and have open conversations about what works best for them, for the company.
Exactly, because if people are unhappy and feel like they're not being heard, that's not going to be good for anyone. It can lead to lower productivity and higher turnover.
And ultimately, it's going to hurt the company's bottom line.
Right. So this whole situation at JPMorgan Chase, it's not just a juicy piece of gossip. It's a sign of the times. It shows how much the world of work is changing and how companies are having to adapt.
And it's a reminder to all of us that we have a voice in this insight. We can advocate for the kind of work environment that we want and need.
And we should, because at the end of the day, it's about finding a way to work that is sustainable and equitable and fulfilling for everyone.
That's a great point to end on. I think this deep dive has given us all a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
So that was today's episode of my Side Hustle Weekend podcast. For everyone listening, if you're ready to take action on what you learned today, here's where you can find more resources. First, head over to sidehustleweekend.com. I've put together detailed guides, templates, and case studies. And while you are there, don't miss out on my free newsletter, Side Hustle Weekend. If you found value in today's discussion, hit that like button and subscribe to join our Weekend Hustlers community. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our episodes where we break down more side hustle strategies. Check the description below for all the tools and resources we mentioned today. Remember, everyone's journey starts with a single step. Whether you're looking to make an extra $500 a month or build something bigger, start with what you learned today and take action. So, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode where we'll break down another practical way to grow your income.